Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
What happens when the people who destroy your life steal the exact weapon that will orchestrate their doom? Today, we look at a quiet genius who let his greedy boss steal his billion-dollar AI trading algorithm. The boss and the traitorous girlfriend spent his millions and laughed at his misery. But they missed the digital kill switch buried deep within the millions of lines of code. By the time they realized they were dancing on a landmine, Wall Street billionaires and the FBI were already kicking down their doors. Here we go. I have never been good with people. People are unpredictable, illogical, and driven by emotions that I have never quite understood. I am a man who speaks in the language of numbers, patterns, and code. My name is Silas Reed. For 6 years, I worked as a senior quantitative developer, a quant, for Apex Capital, a ruthless mid-tier hedge fund in the financial district of Chicago. While the charismatic brokers in their $3,000 suits yelled on the trading floor upstairs, I lived in the basement server rooms. I was the ghost in the machine, writing the algorithms that made them their millions. But my day job was just a distraction from my true obsession. For 5 grueling, sleepless years, I had been secretly developing an independent, hyper-advanced high-frequency trading, HFT artificial intelligence in my tiny, cramped apartment. I called it Project Oracle. Traditional trading bots react to the market. Oracle was designed to predict it. By analyzing millions of microtransactions, global news sentiment, and hidden institutional buying patterns, Oracle could map out the collective panic and greed of the stock market milliseconds before it actually happened. In backtesting, it didn't in oppos. T just beat the market. It slaughtered it. It was a flawless, self-learning financial superweapon capable of generating billions of dollars. It was my life's work. I poured my soul, my youth, and my deteriorating health into millions of lines of code. I thought Oracle was my ticket out of the basement. I thought it would finally earn me the respect of the world. Instead, it made me the target of 2 highly sophisticated predators. Because I was so deeply introverted, I was blind to the dark realities of human manipulation. My direct supervisor at Apex Capital was Victor Sterling. Victor was the quintessential Wall Street sociopath. He was tall, aggressively handsome, and possessed a slick, terrifying charm. He didn't in oppos. Know the first thing about coding, but he knew how to exploit the people who did. He constantly took credit for my minor algorithms, presenting them to the board as his own visionary leadership. I tolerated Victor because I had someone waiting for me at home. Her name was Chloe. Chloe was a junior HR representative at Apex. She had approached me 2 years ago in the company cafeteria. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with warm brown eyes and a smile that made my perpetually anxious heart finally stop racing. She seemed fascinated by my mind. She would listen to me ramble about neural networks and predictive coding for hours, resting her chin on her hands, looking at me with pure admiration. We moved in together after 6 months. She became my anchor. When I worked until 3 a.m. on Oracle, Chloe would quietly come into my home office, rub my aching shoulders, and bring me hot coffee. You and oppos. Rhea genius, Silas, she would whisper, kissing my neck as I typed. When this is done, we and oppos. Rhea going to travel the world. Just you and me. I loved her with a pathetic, desperate intensity. I had spent my entire life feeling invisible, and she made me feel like a god. I trusted her completely. I told her everything about Oracle. I showed her where I kept the physical, encrypted master hard drives. I didn't and oppos. Know she was already sleeping with Victor Sterling. The timeline of my destruction began 3 months before Oracle was finished. Victor had started calling me into his glass-walled office more frequently. He would pour me a glass of expensive scotch and ask casual, probing questions about my little side project. You and oppos. Rhea brilliant guy, Silas, Victor would say, leaning back in his leather chair, a predatory smile on his face. If you ever crack that predictive algorithm, you should let Apex handle the rollout. We could make you a very wealthy man. I politely declined, stating it was strictly a personal academic project. I didn't in Oppos. T want Apex owning my life in Oppos. S work, but Victor didn't in Oppos. T stop. He began to pressure me. My work hours were suddenly doubled. He assigned me impossible, grinding tasks, hoping to break my spirit and force me to use Oracle just to keep up. At home, Chloe and Oppos' behavior subtly shifted. The sweet, supportive girlfriend slowly morphed into a quiet interrogator. Silas, baby, she asked one night, tracing her fingers across my chest as we lay in bed. If Oracle is so powerful, how do you protect it? What if a hacker tries to steal it? It and Oppos' air-gapped, I explained blindly, thrilled that she was taking an interest in my work. The core compilation ISN and Oppos' T on the cloud. It only exists on the black solid-state drive in the floor safe. It requires a physical biometric decryption key. Wow, she murmured, a strange, calculating glint in her eye. You really have thought of everything. I was too exhausted, too deeply in love to see the red flags. I didn't in Oppos. T noticed how often she texted someone late at night. I didn't in Oppos. T noticed the faint smell of Victor's distinct, expensive cologne on her clothes when she came home from late HR meetings. They were mapping my defenses. They were waiting for the masterpiece to be finished. It happened on a rainy Thursday night in November. I sat in my dark home office, staring at my dual monitors. The final compilation bar hit 100%. The neural network successfully closed its final predictive loop. Project Oracle was fully operational. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. I transferred the final, flawless master code onto the black solid-state drive, locked it in its titanium casing, and placed it on my desk. I ran into the living room and picked Chloe up, spinning her around in pure, unadulterated joy. It and Oppos' done, Chloe. I laughed, tears welling in my eyes. It actually works. We and Oppos. Free. I and Oppos am going to resign from Apex tomorrow. I and Oppos am going to license the algorithm to an independent bank in London. We and Oppos going to be billionaires. Chloe smiled, but her eyes were completely dead. It was a cold, terrifying look that I would replay in my nightmares for years. That and Oppos' amazing, Silas, she said softly. We need to celebrate. Let me pour you a drink. She walked into the kitchen and poured me a heavy glass of bourbon. I drank it in one gulp, completely intoxicated by the euphoria of my success. 10 minutes later, the room began to spin violently. My legs felt like lead. I stumbled toward the sofa, my heart hammering in my chest. Chloe? I slurred, my vision going dark. What did you? She stood over me, watching me collapse onto the rug. She didn't in Oppos' reach out to catch me. She just pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number. He and Oppos' out, I heard her say as the darkness finally consumed me. Come get the drive. I woke up the next morning on the floor of my living room. My head was pounding with a sickening chemical headache. I dragged myself up. The apartment was eerily quiet. Chloe? I called out, my voice hoarse. I walked into my home office. The titanium casing on my desk was open. The black solid-state drive containing Project Oracle was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. I ran into the bedroom. Chloe's closet was completely empty. Her suitcases were gone. Her pictures were gone. She had vanished. Before my panic could fully materialize, my phone rang. It was Victor Sterling. Silas, Victor said, his voice dripping with fake concern. I need you in my office immediately. HR is here. It and Oppos' an emergency. Still dizzy from whatever Chloe had drugged me with, I ordered a cab and rushed to Apex Capital. When I walked into Victor's glass-walled office, I found him sitting behind his desk. Beside him stood 2 massive, armed corporate security guards. Sit down, Silas, Victor commanded coldly. Victor, my apartment was robbed, I stammered, my hands shaking. Chloe is missing and my hard drive. Be quiet, Victor snapped. He reached under his desk and pulled out a silver Apex Capital laptop. He slammed it onto the glass table. Do you know what this is, Silas? That an Oppo's? That an Oppo's? My work laptop, I said, confused. Security did a random sweep of your bag yesterday evening before you left the building. Victor lied smoothly. They found a hidden partition on this drive containing highly confidential client portfolios and proprietary Apex trading algorithms. You've been stealing from us, Silas. What? No, I shouted, standing up. I have never stolen a line of code in my life. You planted that. Sit down. Victor roared, and the two security guards stepped forward, resting their hands on their holstered weapons. Victor leaned forward, his handsome face twisting into a mask of pure, sociopathic malice. Here is what is going to happen, Silas, Victor whispered, ensuring the guards Kuden and Oppos. Hear the specifics. You are being terminated for cause. Immediately, we are seizing your severance, your unvested stock options, and all of your personal equipment currently on the premises. He smiled, a dark, victorious smirk. Now, I could call the FBI right now and hand them this laptop. They will find the stolen data. You will face 20 years in federal prison for corporate espionage. Or, you can sign this non-disclosure agreement, walk out of this building quietly, and never contact me or Chloe ever again. Hearing her name in his mouth was the final, devastating blow. The puzzle pieces violently slammed into place. Chloe Haddon and Oppos. Just left me. She had stolen Oracle and handed it directly to Victor. They had framed me for theft to legally strip me of my resources and terrify me into silence. They had stolen my 5 years of agony, and they were going to use it to make themselves gods. I looked at the NDA. I looked at the armed guards. I was a quiet, introverted programmer with no money, no powerful friends, and a chemically induced migraine. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Victor snatched the paper, his smile widening. Good boy, Silas. Security, escort this thief off the property. I was dragged out of the building and thrown onto the freezing concrete of the Chicago streets. I had no job. I had no girlfriend. I had no money. But as I sat on the curb, watching the elite brokers walk past me, the shock and despair slowly began to burn away, replaced by a cold, mathematical clarity. Victor thought he had stolen a gold mine. He thought he had outsmarted the basement ghost. But Victor wasn't an Oppos, a coder. He didn't an Oppos. Know that an architect never builds a fortress without hiding a backdoor in the blueprints. He had stolen the weapon, but he didn't an Oppos. Realized he was holding it backward. In the financial world, billions of dollars can change hands in the blink of an eye, based entirely on who possesses the superior mathematical edge. Victor didn't an Oppos. Waste a single day. Within a week of throwing me onto the street, he presented Project Oracle to the senior partners at Apex Capital. He didn't an Oppos. Call it Oracle, of course. He rebranded it as the Vanguard Matrix, claiming he had secretly hired a team of offshore developers to build it under his strict, visionary guidance. The partners were skeptical until Victor ran the live simulations. The algorithm performed exactly as I had designed it to. It was flawless. It digested the chaos of global markets, the subtle shifts in crude oil, the microscopic fluctuations in tech supply chains, the sentiment of breaking news, and executed high-frequency trades with terrifying, absolute precision. In its first 30 days of live trading, the Vanguard Matrix generated a net profit of $85 million. Wall Street noticed immediately. Victor Sterling became a financial messiah overnight. He was featured on CNBC and Bloomberg, wearing his bespoke suits, smiling his arrogant, predatory smile, and taking sole credit for revolutionizing artificial intelligence in modern trading. The senior partners at Apex were so terrified of losing him that they made him a managing director and offered him an unprecedented 20% cut of all profits generated by the algorithm. Victor was swimming in a river of stolen gold, and standing right beside him, wearing a newly purchased $50,000 diamond necklace, was Chloe. I monitored their rise not through hacking, but through the agonizing public display of their success. They were impossible to ignore. They bought a $12 million penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. They hosted lavish, Gatsby-esque parties filled with elite brokers, politicians, and socialites. Chloe's Instagram became a nauseating timeline of stolen wealth, first-class flights to Dubai, private yachts in Monaco, and endless photos of her sipping champagne with the caption, "Hard work pays off, building an empire with my king." She had seamlessly transitioned from the sweet, supportive HR girl who rubbed my shoulders to a cold, entitled high society queen. But a castle built on theft is inherently fragile. Because their entire empire was founded on a lie they told together, there was no true trust between them. Through the financial blogs and whispered rumors of the Chicago trading floors, I learned that Victor's sociopathic nature was beginning to bleed into his personal life. He treated Chloe not as an equal partner, but as an accessory, a trophy he had won for outsmarting the basement ghost. He controlled the bank accounts, the assets, and the narrative. Chloe had sold her soul for a life of luxury, only to realize she had trapped herself in a gilded cage with a monster who could, and would, discard her the moment she became inconvenient. But their internal misery didn't end oppose. Matter to me. I needed them to stay together. I needed them to climb higher. To survive and to maintain the perfect illusion of a defeated man, I had to completely vanish from the tech industry. If I tried to get another coding job, Victor's corporate lawyers would have hunted me down, claiming I was violating the NDA or building a rival system. So, I took a job at Le Petit Chateau, a Michelin-star French restaurant in the heart of downtown Chicago. I wore a crisp white apron, carried a silver tray, and served the very people who had destroyed my life. It was the ultimate camouflage. Nobody looks at a waiter. 3 months into my new job, the inevitable happened. The maitre d' seated a VIP couple at my assigned table in the private alcove. It was Victor and Chloe. They were celebrating Victor's promotion. Chloe wore a stunning black silk dress. Victor wore a tuxedo. As I walked up to the table to pour their water, Victor looked up. His charismatic smile froze. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her diamond necklace, her eyes wide with sudden, unexpected guilt. "Silas?" Victor said, leaning back in his chair, a slow, cruel smirk spreading across his face as he took in my apron and my name tag. Well, how the mighty have fallen. I thought you in Oppos. DB living under a bridge by now. Hello, Victor. Chloe, I said, my voice perfectly level, my posture subservient.
Welcome to Le Petit Château.
May I start you off with a bottle of champagne? Chloe looked away, unable to meet my eyes, her cheeks burning with shame. But Victor was energized. He fed on the humiliation of others. Bring us your most expensive bottle of Dom Perignon, Silas, Victor ordered loudly, making sure the neighboring tables could hear. And make sure you pour it correctly. We wooed Ninapos. T want you to mess this up like you messed up your career. I didn't Ninapos. T flinch. I didn't Ninapos. T break character. I brought the bottle, opened it flawlessly, and poured their glasses. When they finished their $2,000 meal, Victor paid with his heavy black Apex corporate card. He grabbed a $100 bill from his wallet, crumpled it into a tight ball, and tossed it onto the floor at my feet. Pick it up, Silas, Victor sneered, his eyes filled with absolute malice. Consider it a royalty payment for your services. I looked at the crumpled bill on the floor. I looked at Chloe, who was staring down at her lap, refusing to intervene. I slowly bent down, picked up the $100 bill, and put it in my apron. I stood back up and looked Victor dead in the eye, offering him a polite, entirely dead smile. Thank you, sir, I said softly. Enjoy your evening. Victor laughed, grabbing Chloe's arm and leading her out of the restaurant, completely convinced that he had utterly broken my spirit. He thought he was a titan stepping on an ant. He didn't Oppos. Tino the ant was just waiting for him to step onto the landmine. When my shift ended at 2 a.m., I walked back to my tiny, dilapidated studio apartment on the south side. I locked the deadbolt, pulled down the blinds, and opened a cheap, second-hand laptop. I didn't Oppos. T need high-end servers. I didn't Oppos. T need to hack into Apex Capital. I just needed to monitor the public trading volumes. Victor thought he had stolen a completed masterpiece. He thought the Oracle algorithm was a closed loop of perfect predictive logic. And it was functionally. But Victor wasn't and Appos, T the architect. I was deep within the millions of lines of base code, buried beneath layers of encrypted diagnostic subroutines that Victor's engineers would never dare touch for fear of breaking the machine. I had embedded a dormant logic bomb. I called it the Icarus Protocol. It wasn't an Appos, a timed bomb. A timed bomb is sloppy. If the algorithm crashed on a random Tuesday when they were only managing a few $1,000,000, Victor would just claim it was a software glitch, use his vast wealth to hire a team of coders to patch it, and survive. No, if I was going to destroy them, I had to ensure the explosion was completely unsurvivable. The Icarus Protocol was a threshold trigger. It was programmed to remain entirely dormant, running flawlessly and making them billionaires, until the algorithm was actively managing a live, leveraged portfolio exceeding $10 billion in a single trading session. I needed them to fly as close to the sun as humanly possible. I needed them to be trusted with the wealth of entire nations. Because when the $10 billion threshold was breached, the Icarus Protocol wouldn't and Appos, T just shut the algorithm down. It would invert it. The AI would seamlessly switch its predictive logic. It would identify the optimal, most profitable trades and actively execute the exact opposite. It would buy high, sell low, and short squeeze itself at the speed of light, effectively vaporizing billions of dollars of institutional wealth in a matter of minutes. And because Victor was the one who stole the code, claimed it as his own, and slapped his name on the patents, the federal government wouldn't and Appos, T blame a software glitch. They would blame the architect. 8 months after the incident at the restaurant, Victor's greed finally eclipsed his common sense. He was making millions at Apex Capital, but he was furious that the senior partners were taking 80% of the profits generated by his algorithm. Victor's sociopathic arrogance convinced him that he no longer needed the firm. In a massive, highly publicized corporate coup, Victor abruptly resigned from Apex Capital. He breached his non-compete clauses, stole Apex's top 5 institutional clients, and took the stolen algorithm with him to launch his own independent hedge fund, Sterling Vanguard. Chloe was named Chief Operating Officer, a title she was entirely unqualified for, but it kept her quiet and complicit. To legitimize his new firm and crush Apex forever, Victor needed a whale, a client so massive it would cement Sterling Vanguard as the most powerful fund in the world. He found one. The Global Sovereign Wealth Consortium, a massive international banking conglomerate representing the retirement funds and treasury assets of 3 European nations. They were looking for a new firm to actively manage a hyper-aggressive, leveraged portfolio worth exactly $12 billion. Victor wanted that contract more than he wanted oxygen. The management fees alone would make him a billionaire in a year. He pitched them the algorithm. The consortium executives were blown away by the historical data. But because Victor's firm was brand new, the consortium demanded a blood oath. To secure the $12 billion contract, Victor and Chloe had to sign a fiduciary guarantor clause. They legally bound their personal wealth, their newly purchased penthouse, their offshore accounts, and their absolute legal liability to the performance of the fund. If Victor engaged in gross negligence or algorithmic fraud, the consortium had the legal right to seize everything they owned and pursue maximum criminal charges. Blinded by the promise of infinite wealth, completely confident in the stolen code he didn't and Appos. T understand? Victor and Chloe signed the documents on live financial television. I sat in my dark, cramped apartment, watching the broadcast on my cheap laptop. Victor shook hands with the European bankers, flashing his perfect, predatory smile to the cameras. The countdown to absolute zero had officially begun. The launch day of Sterling Vanguard's management of the consortium's $12 billion portfolio was treated like a national holiday on Wall Street. Victor had rented out the entire top floor of the Willis Tower. He built a state-of-the-art, glass-enclosed trading floor that looked like the bridge of a spaceship. Giant digital screens lined the walls, waiting to display the live returns of the algorithm. Victor had invited a film crew from a major financial network to broadcast the event live. He wanted the world to watch him become a legend. Chloe stood by his side, wearing a custom white designer suit. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. She gave an interview to the cameras, smiling brightly. "It's all about visionary risk," she purred into the microphone. "Victor and I built this algorithm from scratch because we believe that true genius ISN and Oppos. T afraid to disrupt the old ways. I wasn't and Oppos. T at the Willis Tower. I was sitting at a sticky booth in a greasy diner near my apartment, nursing a black coffee. I had my cheap laptop open on the table, tethered to the diner's terrible Wi-Fi. I didn't in Oppos. T need a secure connection to watch the destruction. I just needed to watch the public market ticker. At exactly 9:30 a.m., the New York Stock Exchange opened. On the live broadcast, Victor dramatically pressed a key on his master terminal. The $12 billion of European institutional wealth was officially transferred into the Sterling Vanguard accounts and fed directly into the algorithm. The crowd of invited elite brokers and journalists clapped politely. Champagne corks popped. I took a slow sip of my coffee, my eyes locked on my screen. 10 billion. The algorithm ingested the capital. Deep within the encrypted architecture, a dormant line of code. A string of logic I had written while Chloe was kissing my neck in my old apartment. Suddenly recognized the numerical value. The Icarus protocol woke up. For the first 3 minutes, the algorithm behaved perfectly. It executed a few million microtrades, generating a quick $2 million in profit. Victor pointed to the green numbers on the giant screens, laughing and shaking hands with the European bankers who had flown in for the launch. Then, at exactly 9:34 a.m., the inversion engaged. The AI and Oppos' predictive neural network identified an incoming massive sell-off in the tech sector. Under normal circumstances, the algorithm would instantly short the stock, making billions as the price dropped. Instead, Icarus inverted the command. With the speed of light, the algorithm took the entire $12 billion portfolio and aggressively bought every single plunging tech stock on the market at maximum margin leverage. It was buying the absolute peak of a collapsing wave. On the Willis Tower trading floor, the giant screens violently flickered. The soft, calming green numbers instantly turned a harsh, bleeding red. Minus $150 million. The champagne glasses stopped halfway to the brokers and Oppos' mouths. "What was that?" a European banking executive asked, his thick accent laced with sudden alarm. "Just a market hiccup," Victor said smoothly, though his eyes darted nervously to the screen. "The AI is adjusting to the volume. Give it a second." But a high-frequency trading AI doesn't and Oppos' need a second. It operates in microseconds. Before Victor could even blink, Icarus found a massive spike in crude oil. Instead of buying, it aggressively shorted the peak right as a major geopolitical supply cut was announced. The screens flashed again. Minus $800 million. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the frantic, terrifying clacking of keyboards as Victor's newly hired genius engineers desperately tried to understand what the machine was doing. "Kill it," Victor barked, his charismatic facade shattering completely. He rushed over to the lead engineer and Oppos' terminal. "Cut the server connection. Stop the trades. I can and Oppos' the lead engineer screamed, his hands flying across the keyboard, his face slick with panic sweat. "It and Oppos' locking me out. The algorithm has engaged an autonomous failsafe. Every time I try to initiate a manual override, it dynamically encrypts the terminal." "What do you mean you can and Oppos' Victor roared, grabbing the engineer by the collar. "You wrote the UI. Pull the damn plug." "I didn't and Oppos' write the base code," the engineer shrieked back. "You told us the core architecture was untouchable. It's executing 3 million trades a second. Sir, it's not crashing. It's intentionally liquidating the portfolio." Victor froze, the blood completely draining from his handsome face. "It and Oppos' intentionally liquidating the portfolio." The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. He looked at the code scrolling violently across the monitors. He didn't and Oppos' understand a single line of it. He was a salesman playing God with a machine he had stolen from a ghost. And the ghost had locked the cockpit doors from the outside. To stop Oracle, you needed the master biometric encryption key. The key that had been destroyed when they stole the solid-state drive from my apartment. On the giant screens above them, the numbers were in a terrifying, apocalyptic freefall. Minus $3.2 billion. The European bankers were screaming now. One of them, an older man in a bespoke suit, grabbed his chest and collapsed onto the trading floor. The journalists and oppos. Cameras were still rolling, broadcasting the sheer, unadulterated panic to the entire financial world. In the diner, the waitress walked up to my booth to refill my coffee. She glanced at my screen, which showed a red line plunging straight down. Market taking a hit today. Honey? She asked casually. Just a slight correction, I replied politely, taking another sip. By 9:42 a.m., exactly 8 minutes after the Icarus protocol engaged, the carnage was complete. The Sterling Vanguard algorithm had successfully inverted every optimal trade in the global market. Because Victor had authorized maximum margin leverage to boost his potential profits, the losses were exponential. The $12 billion portfolio didn't, and oppos, T just hit zero. It went deeply, catastrophically negative. Margin calls from every major brokerage on Wall Street flooded the Sterling Vanguard servers. The system automatically triggered a total liquidation of all assets to cover the catastrophic debt. The giant screens in the Willis Tower froze. The final number hung in the air, glowing in neon, blood red. Total portfolio value, minus $1.4 billion. They hadn't, and oppos, T just lost the $12 billion. They had generated a $1.4 billion debt on top of it. The trading floor was a war zone. Security was dragging the camera crews out. Paramedics were rushing in for the collapsed banker. The remaining executives were screaming into their cell phones, frantically calling their lawyers. Victor stood in the center of the room, completely paralyzed. His tailored suit felt heavy. His breathing was shallow and ragged. He remembered the fiduciary guarantor clause he had signed with such arrogance. He had personally guaranteed the fund. His penthouse, his offshore accounts, his cars, his future, all of it was instantly vaporized. Worse, because the algorithm had executed the trades, the consortium would immediately pursue criminal charges for gross negligence and algorithmic fraud. He was looking at 30 years in federal prison. He was entirely, irreversibly ruined. Victor stumbled backward into his private glass office, locking the door behind him. Chloe was already inside, frantically stuffing jewelry and bearer bonds from the office safe into her designer handbag. "What are you doing?" Victor asked, his voice hollow. Chloe didn't, and oppos. T look at him. I and oppos am leaving, Victor. The bankers are already calling the FBI. The consortium is tied to Russian oligarch money. They aren't, and oppos. T just going to sue us. They are going to have us killed. We have to flee the country. The shock in Victor's brain violently morphed into absolute, homicidal rage. We? Victor snarled, crossing the room and grabbing her violently by the arm. The designer handbag dropped to the floor, spilling diamonds across the carpet. There is no, and oppos. We and oppos. You parasitic bitch. This is your fault. My fault. Chloe shrieked, fighting to pull her arm away. You told me to drug him. You told me to steal the hard drive. You said the code was clean. He set us up. Victor roared, spit flying from his lips. The basement rat set us up. He knew we would steal it, and he built a bomb inside it. Then you should have hired real engineers to check it. Chloe screamed back, tears streaming down her face. All the high society elegance completely stripped away, leaving only a terrified, cornered thief. You arrogant fool. You were too cheap and too proud to let anyone look at the base code. You killed us. They screamed at each other, trapped in the glass box of their own making, while the sirens of police cars began to wail down on the Chicago streets below. They thought they had committed the perfect crime against a defenseless victim, but they had simply walked into the most intricate, devastating trap in financial history. I closed my laptop in the diner. I left a $20 tip for the waitress, put on my coat, and walked out into the crisp, morning air. It was time to reclaim my property. The speed of the federal response was unprecedented. When you vaporize $12 billion of international institutional wealth on live television, the government does not wait to issue a subpoena. 10 minutes after the Icarus protocol triggered the final margin call, the elevators on the top floor of the Willis Tower dinged open. A swarm of FBI agents wearing tactical windbreakers flooded the Sterling Vanguard trading floor. They moved with absolute, terrifying precision. Agents immediately began physically unplugging servers, seizing laptops, and securing the terrified engineers. Victor and Chloe had barely made it out of the glass office. They were sprinting toward the private executive stairwell when 4 armed agents cut them off. Victor Sterling and Chloe Adams. The lead agent barked, his hand resting firmly on his holstered weapon. "Do not move another inch. Put your hands on your heads. You Don and Oppos." "T understand," Victor yelled, his voice cracking with panic, desperately trying to summon the charismatic authority that had defined his entire life. "I am the CEO. My firm is under a cyber attack. You need to be looking for the hacker, not arresting me. The only thing we are looking for is you, Mr. Sterling," the agent replied coldly. He grabbed Victor's tailored arm, twisted it painfully behind his back, and clamped the heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Chloe screamed as an agent grabbed her, forcing her against the glass wall to cuff her. Her designer handbag dropped to the floor, spilling the stolen diamonds and bearer bonds across the carpet. The agent looked down at the spilled jewels, then back up at Chloe with pure disgust. "Fleeing the jurisdiction with untraceable assets. Add flight risk and attempted grand larceny to the charges." They were dragged back through the center of the trading floor. The financial news cameras, which had been broadcasting the launch, pivoted to capture the humiliating spectacle. Victor Sterling, the Messiah of Wall Street, was weeping. His bespoke suit was rumpled, his hair a mess. Chloe was sobbing hysterically, her mascara running down her face, screaming at the cameras that it wasn't Oppos. Her fault. They were escorted down to the lobby and shoved into the back of separate federal transport vehicles. As the doors slammed shut, sealing them in the dark, the reality of their absolute ruin finally settled over them like a suffocating blanket. The FBI field office in Chicago is a cold, sterile place, designed specifically to break the spirits of arrogant white-collar criminals. Victor sat in a windowless interrogation room, his hands chained to a steel table. He had been there for 10 hours. He was exhausted, terrified, and desperate. The heavy metal door opened. 2 senior FBI financial crimes investigators walked in, carrying a massive stack of thick, red-flagged folders. "I want my lawyer," Victor demanded, his voice hoarse. "I and Oppos am not saying another word until I speak to my corporate defense team. Your corporate defense team resigned 4 hours ago," Mr. Sterling, the lead agent said, taking a seat across from him. "Your firm is bankrupt. Your personal assets, your offshore accounts, and your penthouse have been legally seized by the European Consortium under the fiduciary guarantor clause you signed. You have $0 to your name. You will be assigned a public defender tomorrow." Victor physically recoiled. The breath was knocked out of his lungs.
$0.
"You and Oppos, refacing federal charges for massive securities fraud, gross negligence, and international wire fraud," the agent continued, opening the first folder. "The European Banking Consortium is demanding a life sentence. But we know how these things work, Victor. An algorithm doesn't and Oppos. Just invert itself. You programmed a backdoor to intentionally tank the portfolio so you could short the market through shadow accounts, didn't and Oppos. You? No," Victor screamed, slamming his chained hands on the table. "I didn't and Oppos. Program anything. I Don and Oppos. Know how to code." It was Silas Reed. He was a quant at Apex Capital. He wrote the algorithm. He set me up. The 2 FBI agents looked at each other, then back at Victor, their expressions completely deadpan. "Silas Reed?" the agent asked, pulling a document from the file. "We checked your employment records at Apex. Silas Reed was fired for cause by you for stealing proprietary data nearly a year ago. Furthermore, he has absolutely no connection to the Vanguard Matrix algorithm. He built it in his basement." Victor pleaded desperately. "I took it from him. Ask Chloe. She drugged him, And we stole the hard drive. The agent leaned forward, sliding a certified document across the steel table. It was the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office registration for the Vanguard Matrix Artificial Intelligence. This is the official patent for the algorithm, Mr. Sterling, the agent said coldly. Filed by you under penalty of federal perjury, claiming you were the sole visionary and architect of the code. In your media interviews, you repeatedly stated you built this from scratch. Victor stared at the patent. His own signature stared back at him. The brilliance of my trap finally crushed him. Victor's own massive sociopathic ego was the final nail in his coffin. To steal the glory, he had to legally claim absolute ownership of the machine. He had built an ironclad paper trail proving that he was the sole creator. If he admitted he stole it, he was confessing to a separate massive federal crime and admitting to perjury. If he claimed it was his, he was entirely responsible for the $12 billion destruction. There was no escape. The ghost was completely invisible, and Victor was holding the smoking gun. While Victor was weeping in a concrete cell, I walked into the lobby of Harrison and Amp. Vance, the most elite, ruthless corporate law firm in Chicago. I was in Oppos, T wearing a waiter and Oppos, S apron. I wore a tailored, slate gray suit. I carried a heavy, titanium briefcase. I didn't in Oppos, T have an appointment, but when I told the receptionist I had the solution to the Sterling Vanguard crisis, I was immediately escorted into a massive mahogany boardroom. 5 senior partners and 2 frantic executives from the European Sovereign Wealth Consortium were waiting for me. The Europeans looked exhausted, their careers destroyed by the $12 billion vaporization. Who are you? The lead consortium executive asked, his voice tight with stress. Are you with the FBI? My name is Silas Reed, I said calmly, placing the titanium briefcase on the table. I am the original architect of the algorithm Victor Sterling stole. The room erupted into shouts of disbelief and anger. Stole? The executive yelled. Sterling patented it. And if you wrote it, you and Oppos. Re the terrorist who just destroyed our national pensions. Sit down, I commanded. My voice was in Oppos. T loud, but the absolute, chilling authority in my tone silenced the room instantly. I opened the briefcase. I pulled out a stack of documents and slid them across the table. These are time-stamped, blockchain-verified cryptographic hashes of the original Oracle source code, registered directly with the U.S. Copyright Office 6 months before Victor Sterling ever filed his fraudulent patent, I explained. I have undeniable, absolute proof that Victor Sterling and Chloe Adams stole my intellectual property, drugged me, and framed me for corporate theft to cover their tracks. The senior partners of the law firm rapidly scanned the documents. Their eyes widened. The proof was irrefutable. The algorithm triggered a catastrophic failsafe because Victor authorized it to operate beyond its safety parameters without the master biometric key. I lied smoothly. The Icarus protocol was my secret. To the world, Victor and Oppos. Ignorance simply caused a system overload. It doesn't and Oppos. Matter who owns it now. The European executive cried out in despair. The money is gone. The debt is massive. The money is frozen in the clearinghouses. I corrected him. The algorithm short-squeezed the market, but the massive volume triggered automatic SEC circuit breakers. A significant portion of the capital is trapped in pending, unresolved algorithmic ledgers. But the servers at Sterling Vanguard are locked by a dynamic encryption wall. The FBI and Oppos' cyber team will take a decade to crack it. I leaned forward, looking the desperate bankers dead in the eye. I have the master decryption key, I said softly. I can unlock the servers. I can reverse the pending ledgers. I can salvage 80% of your $12 billion by the end of the day. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. I was holding the keys to their salvation. What do you want, Mr. Reed? The lead partner asked, realizing he was sitting across from a predator far more dangerous than Victor Sterling ever was. Total immunity from the SEC and the FBI regarding the market crash, as my property was stolen and operated without my consent, I stated. Furthermore, Victor Sterling's firm is currently in federal receivership. I want the consortium to use its leverage to force a fire sale of Sterling Vanguard's assets to me, for the price of exactly $1. I will own the servers, the trading floor, and the infrastructure. Then, and only then, will I give you the key. They didn't and oppose. T even hesitate. They drafted the contracts in an hour. I bought $1 billion Wall Street infrastructure for a $1 bill. That afternoon, accompanied by a small army of federal agents and the consortium and oppos. Lawyers, I walked back onto the trading floor of the Willis Tower. The room was still a mess of tipped chairs and abandoned coffee cups. I walked up to the master terminal. The FBI Cyber Division stepped aside, having failed for 24 hours to bypass the encryption I had designed. I placed my thumb on the biometric scanner I had secretly installed in the hardware months ago. The red, apocalyptic screens instantly flashed black, then rebooted to a calm, glowing blue. The dynamic encryption dissolved. The Icarus protocol deactivated, instantly initiating the reversal sequence for the pending, frozen margin ledgers. Within 30 minutes, the screens displayed a stable number, $9.6 billion. I had saved them from total ruin. The European executives wept openly, shaking my hand, calling me a genius. The media narrative shifted overnight. I went from an unknown, disgraced quant to the brilliant, victimized architect who swooped in to save the global economy from a rogue, sociopathic CEO. I didn't in oppos. Take Victor in oppos. Old office. I had the glass walls shattered and replaced with solid, soundproof walls. I renamed the firm Oracle Capital. I fired every sycophant Victor had hired and brought in the brilliant, introverted coders who actually understood the machine. I had been thrown out of the building as a thief. I returned as the undisputed king of Wall Street. 2 months later, Victor and Chloe were awaiting their formal sentencing. They were being held in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in downtown Chicago. I used my newfound immense leverage to arrange a private, highly irregular joint visitation. I sat in a sterile, concrete interrogation room. The heavy steel door opened, and a guard escorted Victor and Chloe inside. They were both wearing faded orange jumpsuits. They were shackled at the wrists and waist. The transformation was staggering. Chloe's hair was dull and matted. Her skin was pale and broken out from the stress of federal holding. Victor had lost 20 pounds. He looked completely hollowed out, a ghost of the arrogant titan he had pretended to be. They sat down across from me at the metal table. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Victor stared at my tailored suit, his mind finally grasping the full, terrifying scope of his defeat. "It was you?" Victor whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and sheer terror. "The inversion, the encryption. You didn't an oppos. Just build an algorithm. You built a guillotine. I warned you, Victor," I replied calmly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I told you I didn't an oppos. Want Apex to have it. You decided to take it anyway. You thought because I didn't an oppos. Because I didn't an oppos. Wear a fancy suit, I was weak." Chloe began to sob quietly, her head resting on her chained hands. "Silas, please. I and oppos. Am so sorry. He manipulated me. I loved you, Silas. I really did." I looked at the woman who had poisoned me and left me on the floor of my own apartment. I felt absolutely nothing. The love I had for her had been an illusion, a glitch in my own emotional code. "You loved the idea of wealth, Chloe," I corrected her softly. "And you got it. For 8 months you lived like a queen. But a system built on corrupted code will inevitably crash." "What do you want, Silas?" Victor asked, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. "You have the company. You have the algorithm. They and oppos. Gonna give me 30 years. Haven and oppos. You taken enough?" I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. "I didn't an oppos. Pull out a legal document or a contract." I pulled out a single, crumpled $100 bill. I slid it across the cold steel table until it rested in front of Victor's chained hands. Victor stared at the bill. He remembered the Michelin star restaurant. He remembered throwing it on the floor, laughing as the broken waiter bent down to pick it up. "I don an oppos. Leave debts unpaid, Victor," I said, standing up and adjusting my cuffs. "Consider this a royalty payment for your services." Victor squeezed his eyes shut, a choked sob escaping his throat as the ultimate, poetic humiliation finally broke the last remaining shard of his ego. I didn't oppose. Wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the interrogation room. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing down the long, cold corridor. The trap was sprung, the predators were caged, and the architect finally walked out into the light, completely untouchable. With Victor and Chloe caged and the European Consortium and Oppos' capital safely locked within my servers, my vengeance was nearly complete. But in the architecture of absolute destruction, you do not leave loose ends. Apex Capital, the mid-tier hedge fund where I had spent 6 years in the basement, still existed. They were the ones who had enabled Victor. The senior partners were the ones who had blindly accepted his lies, sent armed guards to intimidate me, and fired me without a second thought. They thought they had escaped the blast radius of Victor's collapse. They were wrong. Oracle Capital was now the most powerful autonomous trading entity on the planet. I didn't need to send lawyers to destroy Apex. I just needed to use the machine. I spent a week manually mapping Apex Capital's primary institutional positions. Because Victor had modeled his new firm's early strategies on Apex's core portfolios, I knew exactly where they were heavily leveraged. They were deeply exposed in international shipping and commercial real estate. I didn't use the Icarus protocol. I used Oracle and Oppos' true predictive power. I unleashed the algorithm to actively hunt Apex Capital. Every time Apex tried to buy a block of shares, Oracle front-ran them by milliseconds, driving the price up. Every time they tried to sell to cover a loss, Oracle flooded the market, driving the price into the dirt. It was algorithmic strangulation. Within 14 days, Apex Capital lost 40% of its total value. The partners were bleeding cash. They couldn't understand why the market was actively adapting to crush their specific trades. By the end of the month, Apex was facing insolvency. Desperate to avoid a catastrophic bankruptcy, the board of directors sought an emergency buyout. They received exactly one offer. I walked into the Apex Capital boardroom, wearing my slate gray suit. The 5 senior partners who had authorized my termination a year earlier stared at me in stunned silence. Mr. Reed, the managing partner stammered, his face pale. You and Oppos, Reed, the CEO of Oracle Capital? I said, dropping a single legal binder onto their polished table. I am offering to acquire the remaining assets of Apex Capital for 10 cents on the dollar. You will all step down immediately. You will receive no severance, and your unvested stock options are officially voided. That and Oppos' extortion, partner shouted. We and Oppos' LL go to the SEC. Go ahead, I replied coldly. By tomorrow morning, Oracle will squeeze your remaining shipping shorts until your firm owes billions in margin debt. You sign this or you lose your personal homes. You have 3 minutes. They signed. I didn't keep the firm. The next day, I systematically liquidated every single Apex asset, fired the entire executive board, and dissolved the company into dust. The building was emptied. The institution that had treated me like a disposable rat was erased from the financial map forever. The wheels of federal justice finally brought Victor and Chloe to the end of the line. The sentencing hearing was a media circus. The public was obsessed with the spectacular rise and catastrophic fall of the golden couple of Wall Street. I didn't attend. I had no desire to watch them weep for the cameras. I sat in my soundproof office at the top of the Willis Tower, sipping black tea, reading the live court transcripts as they were uploaded by my legal team. Chloe's defense strategy had been entirely based on playing the victim. She claimed Victor had emotionally abused her and forced her to steal the hard drive. The federal judge, a woman who had zero tolerance for corporate parasites, saw right through the performance. Ms. Adams, the judge's remarks read in the transcript. You were not a victim. You were an active, enthusiastic participant in a devastating conspiracy. You weaponized a man and Oppos' affection to steal his life in Oppos' work, and then you happily spent the stolen funds on international vacations and diamond necklaces. Your lack of technical knowledge does not absolve your profound moral bankruptcy. Chloe was sentenced to 15 years in a federal women and Oppos correctional facility. Then came Victor. Victor didn't and Oppos speak. According to my lawyers, he just stared blankly at the wooden defense table. The crushing weight of his arrogance, the loss of his billionaire status, and the sheer humiliation of being outsmarted by a man he considered subhuman had completely broken his mind. Mr. Sterling, the judge announced, your sociopathic greed nearly triggered an international financial crisis. You are a predator who disguised himself as a visionary. You will spend the rest of your natural life where your lies hold absolutely no currency. Victor received 35 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. I closed the transcript window on my monitor. I didn't in Oppos smile. I didn't in Oppos celebrate. The equation was simply balanced. The variables had been corrected. With my enemies buried, I turned my attention to building my true legacy. I hated the toxic, hypermasculine, screaming boiler room culture of Wall Street. So, I completely redesigned the top floor of the Willis Tower. I had all the massive, anxiety-inducing red and green ticker screens removed. I tore out the open-plan trading desks. In their place, I built individual, soundproof, climate-controlled pods for every single engineer. The lighting was soft and dim. The break rooms didn't in Oppos serve champagne. They were stocked with high-end teas, noise-canceling headphones, and walls of academic textbooks. I didn't in Oppos hire charismatic salesmen or Ivy League legacy brokers. I hired the introverts. I hired the brilliant, socially anxious coders, the neurodivergent mathematicians, and the quiet geniuses who had been overlooked and exploited by men like Victor their entire lives. I gave them massive salaries, complete creative freedom, and absolute respect. Oracle Capital became the most powerful financial institution in the world, managing hundreds of billions of dollars. But if you walked onto our floor, it was as quiet as a library. There was no shouting. There were no egos. Just the gentle hum of servers and the quiet clicking of keyboards. I had built a utopia for the ghosts in the machine. Years passed. The world forgot about Victor Sterling and Chloe Adams. The news cycle moved on to new scandals and new titans. In a massive, concrete laundry facility within a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania, Victor spent his days pushing a heavy canvas cart of soiled uniforms. He was aging rapidly. His hair had thinned and turned gray. The charismatic voice that had once commanded boardrooms was now a raspy whisper. He only used to ask the guards for permission to use the restroom. He had tried, in his first year, to tell the other inmates that he used to be a billionaire. They had just laughed and beaten him for his commissary food. Now he kept his mouth shut. He swept the floors. He lived in terror. He was exactly what he had always feared becoming. A nobody. Hundreds of miles away, in a crowded dormitory of a federal women and Oppos camp, Chloe sat on a thin mattress, staring at a blank cinderblock wall. The beauty that she had weaponized to manipulate men had faded under the harsh fluorescent lights and the stress of confinement. She spent her days trading packets of instant coffee for extra bars of soap. They were trapped in the physical manifestations of the cages they had built in their own minds. They had sacrificed their souls for money, and the universe had stripped them of both. Chapter 25. The Architect and Oppos Peace. It was a quiet Friday evening in December. The offices of Oracle Capital were mostly empty. The algorithm was autonomously managing the global portfolios, humming perfectly in the heavily fortified server rooms below my feet. I stood in my private, darkened office, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The snow was falling heavily over Chicago, blanketing the city in a pristine, pure white. The glowing lights of the skyscrapers looked like a massive, beautiful circuit board. I didn't in Oppos have a $12 million penthouse. I lived in a comfortable, heavily secured home in the suburbs. I didn't in Oppos go to galas. I didn't in Oppos give interviews. To the world, the CEO of Oracle Capital was a terrifying, invisible phantom who controlled the global markets with the push of a button. But as I stood there, watching the snow fall, I knew the truth. I was still Silas Reed. I was still the quiet man who loved the elegance of a perfectly written line of code. They had tried to bury me in the dark. They didn't in Oppos. T realized that the dark was where I had learned to see. I turned away from the window, picked up my coat, and walked out into the quiet hallway. The servers hummed softly, a mechanical lullaby. The algorithm was flawless. The ledger was closed. The architect finally had his peace.
Trembling ground, but I hear freedom's roaring sound. Your towers crack beneath our song. The weak turn strong, the right turns wrong. You sold control with silver tongues. Now feel the